Hey everyone, wait a second. Can you feel that? I feel a storm coming. And not just any storm, a hurricane. The AtomStack hurricane. This is the AtomStack hurricane, and it's the first CO2 entry from AtomStack. It's typically known for making and pushing the envelope for diode lasers. In fact, I just reviewed the A24 from AtomStack not too long ago. And you can check that video out here. The Hurricane is a 55-watt CO2 laser with a bed size of 24.5 by 16.5 inches and a work area of 19.5 by 11.8 inches. And here's how that compares to both the X-Tool S1 and the WeCreate Vision. This machine is absolutely massive and just barely fits on the cart that I had for it. The physical machine measures about 25 inches by 40 inches and 8 inches high. Although you'll have to leave a little bit more clearance space for it if you get the riser base, where you could do thicker material and install a rotary, which I don't have the riser base here. Let's go and take a quick tour around the machine. The Hurricane is a beautiful looking machine, topped with a combination of plastic, black acrylic, and metal, especially in the back where the tube is. There's only two buttons on the top. One is to pause and reset, and the other is for autofocus. And we have a couple of different light indicators there for water temp, the laser being on, and flame detection. The side of the machine features our emergency stop button, our safety key for locking the machine when not in use, our power button, and our power connector right there. And I'll talk about the cord they provided a little bit later on. And to the back is where we have our reservoir for filling our water for our laser tube. The back of the machine is almost boring, and I consider that kind of a good thing because that way you don't have to reach behind the machine to do much. But there are a couple exhaust fans. Back here we have our active fire extinguishing water inlet port. So you connect this to a small water reservoir, and if there's a flame detected inside the machine, it'll kind of open up and douse the flame. I actually don't plan on using this, but for people that are a little bit more daring with the machines, probably a good idea. And then the only other thing back here is for the exhaust hose. And then on the far left of the machine, we have a spot for a USB drive, computer connection, and the accessory, which right now I think is mainly for the conveyor, which I don't currently have. The inside of the machine is extremely clean. All the wires and everything are nicely bundled. You really don't see a whole lot sticking out anywhere. The rail system moves nice and smooth, along with the main gantry with the laser head. All the wires are nicely bundled in our little cable track here. We have a manual adjustment if we want for the autofocus. But then down here is our actual autofocus as well. So we can do it manually. There's autofocus, there's our lens, and our various adjustment knobs right there. So AtomStack did a lot of fine engineering when it came to putting all this together. One of the things that I wish they would have implemented, if they could have, is having this front panel kind of pull down or unfold and allowing for more easy access into the machine. It's available on a lot of other machines. It actually makes for a really nice convenience. I'm not sure if AtomStack didn't consider it or because of the way they engineered it, it just wasn't going to be possible. But that would have been kind of nice. Otherwise, I'm actually really impressed by the build and the layout of everything. Something else I want to point out is on a lot of lasers, the lids are somewhat problematic depending on how they're held up. Some are just by gravity and they can come down really easily. But the AtomStack Hurricane has these gas struts here that hold the lid really well. And it kind of makes you feel a bit safer too. It's not going to come down as hard. The lid isn't as heavy as some other machines, but the action of that is kind of nice. One other thing I want to point out is that the Hurricane actually does have a camera. And it does work with light burn. And it is actually right here. Kind of on the inside edge of the lid. And for my testing so far, it's actually worked out pretty well. As long as you have it calibrated correctly within light burn. And a lot of the settings for the Hurricane are kind of dependent on your setup in Lightburn as opposed to the machine itself. Because the machine's solid, it works really well, it has really well made parts, And as long as you have it calibrated correctly and you have the mirrors aligned really well, everything is running really well with the machine. I'm not going to provide a step-by-step guide on how to calibrate the machine. If you would like a step-by-step guide, let me know in the comments and I'll consider doing separate videos for that specifically. But I'm going to go ahead and talk about the steps, and then I want to start getting this thing working and put to use. First step is to fill up the water reservoir. The water reservoir and the water that you're going to fill up in here goes into the tube to keep it cool while in operation. The first step is to put in about 1,000 milliliters of water, let it run for about 10 seconds to kind of cycle through the system and fill up to the recommended level right there. The system is fairly well sealed. You really should not have to refill at any point. I don't think evaporation should really be much of an idea, but it may not be a bad idea to kind of keep an eye on your water level there. As you're filling up the water and cycling it through the tube, it's recommended to take off the back panel here to reveal the tube, to take a look at it as it's filling up and cycling to make sure there's no leaks and that everything looks good. Once you have that filled up and everything is cycled through, go ahead and put the back panel back on, put on the plug, and then now we're ready for the next step. Before you get up and running, there's 3 more things that you have to take care of before you can engrave anything. The first thing you have to do, and it's probably the most critical, is to align your mirrors. Like I said, I'm not going to show a step-by-step guide, but I am going to link down below to a guide I would follow from AtomStack for aligning the mirrors. It's probably the most time-consuming process of the entire setup, but it is critical. If you don't get the mirrors aligned, you're not going to get a good focus, and your cuts are not going to be as dependable and accurate as they should be. The mirrors should be close to being in alignment from being back at the factory, but things tend to shift during shipping, and you're going to have to do the alignment yourself. This is different than some of the other higher end laser systems where the mirrors are locked in place. These can adjust. If you like tinkering with things, if you like making sure that things are at the most optimal setting, then this is for you. One of the benefits of AtomStack and what they've done is they actually have a laser pointer dot here that you're going to use to focus everything. And they also have a small little adapter on there to make sure that it's pinpoint center as it hits the mirror and comes down into the lens. There's a guide from AtomStack for how to do all this, and I will link that down below because it is time consuming. But we do have pretty good controls and adjustment knobs for all of the mirrors if and when you should need them, including our side mirror there and the first mirror that's back over where the laser tube is. Hopefully you don't have to touch that one, but it is accessible and you can adjust it if needed. So once you have all that set, then you should have a pretty good laser dot no matter where you move your laser head within the area. That's step 1. The next 2 steps to get the laser up and going are somewhat optional, but they're dependent on the camera. So if you want to use the camera, you have to do these steps. So one is the camera calibration, and you're going to use this dot pattern that's included with the laser itself, and that's going to be something that you run through Lightburn. There's good tutorials on how to do that, and I will link those down below. And the final step is also related to the camera, and it involves using these cardboard squares here and doing an alignment test, making sure that everything lines up and it calibrates the Lightburn camera, so you can use a camera with the AtomStack and you kind of have the best of both worlds. I still don't use the camera that often, but it is kind of a nice feature. I just tend to use a framing feature, and I've gotten used to doing that over the years. But having the camera accessible and an option for the AtomStack does put it in a nice category of lasers. Since setting up the laser, I've run several calibration tests, and this is what I usually do with all of my new lasers, and I run basically this square of different settings. You see I can engrave at a pretty high speed and all the way to a pretty good power as well. I'm not going past 60 because with this 55 watt, it burns directly through this. There's a little bit of kind of like overburn here, but I'm also going to be using a different air extractor in an upcoming video to show how I can improve on some of that. But that's a pretty good speed and demonstration on MDF. We get a little bit of a cleaner look on a piece of basswood here. Pretty much the same settings, all the way to 60%. And this also gives you a pretty good indication of like the different projects that you're running, how dark you want the engraving, and then what you would need your speed setting and your power setting to be in order to get that. And as we get to these higher settings here, we can see that it engraves into the wood really nicely if you want more of a dimensional look on some of these. And then the last one that we need to take a look at is our cut template. And from here you can see we can do a pretty good range of cutting without having to have the laser at a really high power, which is kind of nice as well. So we can run it at a higher speed, roughly at a lower power, and still get a pretty good result. Now this is with 3mm plywood or 1/8 inch plywood, depending on if you're on the metric or imperial side, but that is pretty nice. I don't get this kind of power output from my diode lasers, so the fact that I could cut faster and with lower power on this machine is going to make me really happy for some future projects. And I also did a quick little engrave test here of Mr. Wolverine, and that came out really nice. Now this is simply just a PNG image on some 3mm basswood, but the difference in the light to dark on here is really nice. And we'll see if we can capture on camera. But this isn't necessarily a flat image either, or flat engraving. It has some depth to it. Maybe you can see a little bit there. It's actually going into the wood. It's not simply marking the wood, but it is engraving it away a little bit. In the future I want to see if I could do kind of like a wood block print using this type of method, but that came out pretty good. Especially for a 55W laser that tends to lose some detail, this is perfectly good for me. This video is really meant to be a brief preview and overview of the machine. AtomStack did send me the Hurricane for review, but they're not paying me for the video, so all my opinions and everything I say about the machine here are my own. I think the AtomStack, for what it offers, is a phenomenal value. It's on sale right now for $27.99, but that price could fluctuate depending on different sales that they are having. And here's how that price compares to other lasers in the same category. So one of the main differences between this laser and other lasers that are within that same power category for CO2 lasers is that the AtomStack does require a little bit more calibration and setup than some of the others. But it allows you to dial this in a little bit better. It's not a locked down system, and you can make adjustments as you see fit for your work. So if you like being able to have a little bit more control over your machine, if you like being able to tinker and adjust things, then this is a better setup than a lot of the others that have a locked down ecosystem. In addition, the primary software for the Hurricane is Lightburn, which is the most widely used pieces of software for lasers, and it is an independent piece of software. AtomStack does have their own software called AtomStack Studio, but it is optional. It is not required in order to use and run this laser. I do have another video coming out soon for the Hurricane, which will be actually a step-by-step process of doing an entire project with this machine, of how it would work and how you can integrate it into your workflow. As much as I like the machine, it is not perfect, just like no machine is actually perfect, but there's a couple small things I want to point out that I think should have been improved and maybe even still can be improved. So number one is the power cord. This is the power cord. It's only about 3.5 to maybe 4 feet long, and it really isn't sufficient for most people's shops unless you're lucky enough to have your machine right next to an outlet, which we probably should, but most of us don't. Luckily enough, I already have a thicker cable in hand and a longer one that is able to use for the machine. But the one that they include is fairly short. It should have been at least a 6-foot cord. Second thing about the machine is, as good as the laser dot system is, it is still really finicky to get into alignment. And that's why it's probably the longest part of the process with getting everything set up. Although once it's set, you really shouldn't have to touch it again, but it was the more frustrating part of the process. It kind of reminds me years ago when I had a K40 laser, when it took forever to focus those mirrors. This was still infinitely better, but I think it still could have been even better than that. So if you're impatient, might want to call somebody over, have them help you out, and get it focused, because it is so vital for any good quality cuts and engravings on your machine. So one final item I want to point out, and this goes for any laser manufacturers that might watch this out there, or any product development people. This is a really, really nice looking machine. And it looks really sleek all in black. But this top scratches really easily. It is a piece of shop equipment, And in some ways we shouldn't care that much, but when people are investing in something, especially when it has a certain look and feel, you probably want it to be a little bit more durable. This has already gotten scratched, and I'm not even 100% sure how. It didn't come that way shipping. This happened while I was here. Probably because somebody in my family didn't get the memo to not put things on top. I could probably polish some of it out, but dust sticks to this really easily. And because of how dark this is, it's hard to monitor the progress of what's going on inside, which maybe it's one of the reasons why you should have the camera hooked up and calibrated properly too, because you can watch it through Lightburn. But I like to be able to kind of peer over and take a look to see how things are going in there. And it's really hard to see through that dark case. And I know that's partially a safety issue, but other CO2 lasers allow a little bit more visibility, and this one is a little bit more difficult to see. But those are the only items I've come across so far using the machine. They kind of stand out as being a little bit awkward or less than ideal. But still, based on the price compared to other machines in the same category, this is definitely one that you should be checking out and at least considering. And if you made it this far in the video, I really want to say thank you. Your time and attention while watching these videos means a lot to me. And if you want to see what else we're up to, go ahead and check out GeekBuilders.net. We have content there, and we also have content on all the different socials. And go ahead and check out patreon.com/geekbuilders. I have files available for sale and free for paid members. We have a pretty good community over there, and we'd love to add more to the discussion and what's going on that Patreon page. So once again, thanks for watching. I will see you in the next video. I do have more content specifically for the Hurricane coming out. And once again, if you'd like to see any of the step-by-step guides, let me know in the comments, and I'll make sure to put that into production for YouTube. So in the meantime, take care. See you in the next video.